Fast Audis. Brilliant engines, terrible chassis, or at least that's what BMW owners would have you believe. Despite this, there's a quiet storm brewing among fast and state enthusiasts, and it's about the car you see here today, the B8 generation supercharged V6 Audi S4. Rumour has it that these cars are not just rapid, handsome and practical, but they also have a genuinely well-sorted chassis, historically a rare thing for Audi. This Misano Red MRC tuned 475 horsepower example is coming live to shootingbreak.com on auction, so you grabbed the keys and took it for a spin to tell you what it's really like to drive. So, got an Audi S4 B8.5 here. Let's just quickly run through what this car is, what it isn't, before we get into the good stuff. So first off, we've got an estate body shell, 3 litre supercharged V6, which sounds absolutely incredible. An all-wheel drive system, DSG 7-speed gearbox, and it's all wrapped up in a very discreet, nondescript package, this being the S4 and not the RS4. Now, first off, more than anything, because this isn't the full-fat RS4, this car should be a completely uncompromised daily. It should be one of those cars where there isn't any moment where you think, oh, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or this is particularly difficult because I've got all of this extra performance. And that is the S4's USP. It's primarily a day-to-day car that also happens to be, quite surprisingly, fun to drive, which we'll get to in a moment, and also quite un-Audi-like. And this S4 fits the bill quite nicely. We've got normal suspension, it's not crashy, it's not too stiff, which is actually quite surprising for an Audi generally, let alone for a performance Audi. We've got a very tractable, torquey powertrain, unlike the RS4 that comes above this. You've got loads of mid-range, you don't need to rev this engine up to get the best out of it, but when you do, it's very, very rewarding. Got a very usable all-wheel drive system, and we've just got normal day-to-day practicality. We've got nice things like an auto boot and a Bang & Olufsen 3,000 pound stereo system, which sounds absolutely incredible. We've got great visibility, we've got lovely easy steering, not the most feelsome unfortunately, but you know, it's nice around town. It's a very usable car. There's no real time where you would think this car is less practical because it's an S4, and that's important because the real play of this car is how three-dimensional it is. It's such a nice tool to have in your arsenal. It's a car to live with, it's a car to move house in, it's a car to take your pets in, your kids in, to pick up people from the airport and get all their bags in, but also when the going gets tough, when you get down the B road, it is genuinely surprisingly fun to drive. We're rolling through town at the moment and it's just a lovely place to be. This interior is stunning. So first off, we've got this deeply sculpted dash that has the MMI screen embedded within it. There's no iPad on the dash kind of look here. And on top of that, we've got these cowled dials that sit way within the dashboard. They look absolutely stunning, they feel super special. And the whole car has this sort of rounded off wide triangle kind of design language. I think Audi were at the top of their game during this era when it came to interior design. Got lovely flashes of metal on this gear lever which feel amazing in your hand. Feels like you're kind of cocking a rifle when you put it into gear, and lovely metal paddles. But this car's a 2015, this interior does not feel like 2015, it feels more like a 2011, 2012. If I were to have bought this new, I would have probably felt that this car is a bit dated compared to competitors. Now, as a used purchase, it simply doesn't matter, and the things that would have dated this car when new, now I mean it's probably going to age a lot better. It's just a normal car. You just get into it, you put it into drive, and you go. You don't need to set anything up, you don't need to go through multiple menus to get to the heater controls and HVAC and all that kind of stuff. It's just get in and go, which I really like, and I think the interior for this car makes it worth buying alone. It really is just such a nice place to be. But it's an S4, and if you want to get an S4, you want to get an S4 because you're a keen driver and you enjoy a bit of go. So first off, have a listen to this. I mean, it just sounds so good. This was an era where everyone was moving towards turbocharged engines, particularly downsized turbocharged engines, and Audi chose to give their S4 a supercharged V6, which is such an unusual proposition. By this point, there simply weren't that many supercharged cars available at all. And what you get with that is a huge amount of character, a super analog feel to the engine, really linear power delivery, loads of mid-range torque, and it revs out. It revs out all the way to about 7,000 RPM, if not a bit before, and it's really rewarding for doing that. On top of that, it's perfectly matched with that DSG gearbox. What I love in particular with this car, it almost feels like a resto mod, because you've got this old school analog character from that supercharged V6, but you've also got the nice fun things that you get with modern performance cars, like DSG farts, which is a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. You change up in this and it just makes the sound of dumping fuel out the exhaust, a bit like an F40, right? It just sounds brilliant, it puts a smile on your face. And the calibration of the DSG makes this feel bang up to date. It really, really does. It's particularly those crisp downshifts when you're coming into a corner, you're braking a bit later into it, and you grab a gear, and it rev matches the downshift, and it's super crisp and nice. And it makes the 335i and the C43 feel just a little bit generic, actually. So you've got national speed limit, and it picks up. So that's not even full throttle. It's such a potent package. So before we get into actual drive dynamics, let's just talk about the spec of this car. As you said, it's a B8.5 S4. There's no real mechanical changes from the 8 to the 8.5. It's just visual. Same powertrain. DSG only in the B8.5, which I think is fine. I think it's a great gearbox. And this one has been tuned by MRC. So, for those who don't know, the 3-litre supercharged engine has a slightly legendary reputation in Audi circles. It's an extremely stout powertrain, very, very reliable, very tunable, very over-engineered. So with a simple map, you can take this from 333 horsepower to almost 400, at which point, as Chris Harris showed years and years ago, it will out-drag a B8.5 RS4, which is really impressive. This one's pushing a little bit more than that, and it's got a Miltech valved exhaust that sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, that will just put a smile on your face every single day. It's so good. I mean, the powertrain alone is just so rewarding, and for a daily car, that's kind of all you need, because what you want from a day-to-day car is bags of character, loads of usability, and performance that's actually genuinely usable. It's not just tied up at the top end of a long-geared manual gearbox car. Right, so what's it actually like to drive? We've got a lovely bit of British B-road here. It's dry, it's optimal conditions. It's the kind of place where you would love to be in like a 911 Carrera or something like that. And I'll tell you what, I'm definitely not upset to be in this Audi S4. And I'm not really an Audi guy, I'm not really into them. I'm not really into the brand ethos behind them, with typically being understeery and over-damped and very attractive. But this is really, really fun. It's actually kind of beyond belief, considering it's not even a full-fat RS. So what do we have? First off, we've got numb, vague steering, which isn't great. It's electric in the B8.5. It's not the best calibrated electric steering I've driven. It's easy and quick around town, which is fine, but it's completely devoid of any kind of feel, and it's not the most direct feeling rack either, which is a disappointment. But you get an Audi, you don't expect amazing steering anyway. And I think this car is interesting because I personally, I'm a big fan of having good steering in a car, but in this, it somehow just doesn't get in the way. It doesn't really bother me. And I think it's because the way this car wants to be driven is not a corner entry car, but it's a daily estate. It doesn't need to be like that to be fun, not necessarily. You've got these lovely downshifts which you can just crack through on corner entry. And then as soon as you get the car turned in, you can kind of feel it getting lent onto its outside wheels. As soon as you get that feeling, you can basically just nail it. It's way more fun than data car has any right to be. Way more fun than something like a Golf R or Golf GTI, in my opinion, which is really high praise considering this is a full fat estate. Just bags of fun, and I think the reason is it's got so much character and it's got so much identity. It is an Audi through and through, and I love that. And you kind of drive around its forge and you lean, you get it loads up, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but this car genuinely really reminds me of a 997.2 turbo 911, which we drove on shooting brake before, and it's got that same feeling of just getting the car set up for a corner. It's quite cerebral. You think about how you're going to set up for the corner, get it loads up, and you've got this all-wheel drive system, you've got this dual clutch gearbox, you've got this amazing calibrated, really characterful powertrain, and you just rock it out. And it's engaging in its own weird way because it's got such a unique drivetrain and powertrain kind of implementation. I really like it. It's full of character. We have to ask, what makes a driver's car? I've spent a lot of time in Porsche Boxster S's. Those are great cars, right? But I don't particularly want one personally because they're so capable, so capable and so well composed that there's almost not a huge amount to do in them. Whereas I love a car where you kind of have to engage, you have to understand what it is, engage with it and drive around that. Right, let's break it down piece by piece. So first off, I'm gonna start driving position because they've nailed it with this car. I've got great visibility, I've got really nice H points sitting nice and low down. I've got my steering wheel right up to my chest, I've got nice bent arms, and I've got loads of adjustability. This car will fit all shapes and sizes with sheer comfort, which is great. The two slightly odd things about it, I think the pedals are quite far forward within the car, which means I've got perhaps more bent knees than I'd like, but you get used to it pretty quickly and it's absolutely fine. Really comfortable place to be. Great big mirrors as well, which is something I really like in the car. Very intuitive to drive quickly, and also you've got these lovely paddles, which are just such a highlight to use. They're kind of these like stubby little ears, you have to reach them a little bit, but they're really nice. They've got this metallic feel to them, which I love. Next up, we've got steering. As you said, not a highlight in this car. It doesn't get in the way, but it's not a highlight, and it's a shame because steering can always add value to a car. It doesn't here. But we've got a lovely steering wheel, which is really nice to hold, really nice to feel in your hands. Next up is chassis, and this is the real surprise with this car. This car is an Audi, and Audi are typically not known for their chassis. Audi have generally had very understeery chassis that are very stiffly sprung, stiffly damped, and they get a bit skittish and they just don't ride very well. This, nothing of the sort. First off, I've had no discernible or detectable understeer. It feels nice and neutral, which again is very un-Audi like. So if you've driven Audis in the past and you've been put off by the way in which they steer, don't let that cloud your judgment for this car. It feels nothing like that. The other surprise is the damping. The damping in this car is extremely well judged. So it's a fixed rate damper. There's no modes, there's no sport mode or anything like that. It's just one damper mode, and it's so well judged for UK roads. It rides really nicely, it's very composed, and more than anything, that level of body control also gives you a great amount of chassis feel. So while you don't get a steering feel, you do get a chassis feel, which tells you so much about what's going on, how much grip you have, and what you should do with the steering, with the throttle, with the brakes. And I love that. Finally, we've got powertrain, which is just such a highlight in this car. This gearbox is so well implemented, and the engine is so punchy. It sounds amazing. It's a real joy to rev out. It's one of those engines that makes you want to interact with it just for the sake of it. It sounds amazing when you rev it out. It sounds amazing in the mid-range. And it's just got this lovely immediacy to it that allows you to be so precise with your inputs. I think the throttle mapping is a little bit eager. You kind of get most of the throttle at the top of the pedal, but it's fine. This isn't a car that requires fine adjustments in throttle to get you down the road. You know, it's not like a E46 M3 where you want to play with the back axle on the throttle. There's something really fun about being able to make progress out of a corner in wet conditions when you know you otherwise wouldn't be able to in a rear-wheel drive car. There's real satisfaction to that. Generally speaking, I think the Audi S4 plays to its strengths really well, and it has this really nice sense of identity that differentiates it from its competitors. It has these classic Audi dichotomies where, you know, you've got this kind of numb steering and this all-wheel drive feel to it, but it plays to its strengths, and it does a few things incredibly well, and it does the rest of them to a competent standard. And that to me is what makes a great car. This one's absolutely lovely spec. It's got amazing service history, it's been over-serviced, really comprehensive paperwork with it. It's had a new gearbox at 60,000 miles, it's now at 94,000 miles, and it's MRC Stage 2 tuned. It's got a dyno-proven 475 horsepower, which is frankly absurd. That is just absolutely unbelievable, and it feels that as well. It really does. Just crazy amount of power, and you don't need to deploy it all the time to really get the best out of this car. It's a lovely spec. It's Misano Red. It's got a black pack. With it being a B8.5, it's one of the last of this generation of supercharged V6 S4s. I think this car is going to be a cult classic. This engine and drivetrain already is among Audi circles. The DSG box is so good. It's so good. It really suits this powertrain. It really brings this engine to life, as does that Miltech valved non-resonant exhaust, which is just spot on for this car. This one's live on shootingbrake.com. It's a 10-day auction. We've got over 100 detailed photographs, comprehensive write-up. We've got a Q&A section where you can ask anything you like about the car. You can arrange to view it if you like, and it's in absolutely fantastic condition. It's been PPF'd, it's been ceramic coated, it's been heavily detailed. The paintwork's in incredible condition, polishes up, cleans up really nicely, and that Misano Red really pops in the sun, as you'll see in this video. We're barely into 2024, but this Audi S4 is guaranteed to be one of the biggest shocks of my year. I've always known Audi for their incredible engines, design and day-to-day usability. This B8.5 Audi S4, for example, is way more refined than its BMW F31 3 Series competitor, and that supercharged V6 is potent beyond belief. The real shock here, however, is the chassis. This S4 Avant is genuinely well sorted, with fantastic damping and wonderfully neutral dynamics. It eggs you on in the corners with the quattro power delivery and snappy DSG changes, making you feel like you're Carlos Sainz on a special stage. It put a smile on my face, and I guarantee it would on yours too, especially after hearing that V6 sing through that Miltech exhaust. This S4 would be a fantastic tool to have in anyone's arsenal, and it could be yours on shootingbrake.com, the auction platform for car enthusiasts. Get your bids in now before I do.